Let's try another one. We have to factor, not just find a GCF, but factor a cubed plus 2a squared minus 8a minus 16. Okay. Let's go ahead and take first two, last two. So I'm going to have a cubed plus 2a squared on the left-hand side. And I'll have negative 8a minus 16 on the right-hand side. Starting on the left, we need to figure out what a cubed and 2a squared have in common. Our smallest coefficient is 1, so our smallest number is 1, which is kind of boring. But they both have an a, which means that we have a GCF other than 1. We're going to take the smallest exponent, smallest number, so everybody can contribute, which is an a squared. We're going to factor that a squared out. Factoring out the a squared means that we're going to have parentheses. Remember, we're going to divide each of these by a squared. A cubed over a squared, 3 minus 2 gets us a to the first. Bring down our plus. A squared over a squared cancels out, and we get the 2. So we have a squared times a plus 2. Looking at the right side with the capulets, the smallest of the numbers is negative 8. 8 goes into itself. 8 also goes into 16, which means that our GCF is going to include an 8. And since our first one is negative, we need to include a negative 8. But it's not going to have an a because the 16 doesn't have an a. So we're going to divide each of these terms by negative 8. And since we're dividing out our GCF of negative 8, we're going to have negative 8 with a parenthesis. Negative 8 over negative 8 becomes positive 1, which gets us a. Negative 16 divided by negative 8 gets us a positive 2, so plus 2. And we're not done yet because we haven't all come together. We're still split on either side of the wall. There's still the minus in between. But notice that the a plus 2 is showing up on both sides. So Romeo and Juliet have gotten together. Life is good for them for a little bit. And that means that we can factor out that a plus 2 that showed up in both. If we're factoring it out, that means we need to open a parenthesis, and we're going to see what's left over. On the left-hand side with the Montagues, we take out the a plus 2. We're left with the a squared. On the right-hand side with the Capulets, if we take out the a plus 2, we're left with a negative 8, which we're going to use as minus 8. And remember that you can also write this as a squared minus 8 times a plus 2. Either is fine because only with our matrices in this class do you have to worry about multiplication not being commutative, where they can flip-flop. Okay, let's try another example. Notice that we have 4 terms, which means we're going to try factor by grouping again. And so far, we've been able to do examples where we can break it first two, last two. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and build the wall, make it solid, and then I'm going to have my plus 8y on the right-hand side, again carrying the sign, so it's nicer when we're doing our last factoring step. If I look on the left-hand side, x, y, and 32 have nothing in common. They have a GCF of 1. So it's like I'm dividing both of those by 1, but it really doesn't get me anywhere. However, whenever I have a GCF, I make sure that my GCF comes out front and I open a set of parentheses. So it's no different here with the 1. When I'm looking at my 8y and my negative 4x, my smallest number is 4. 8's divisible by 4, so I know 4 can be in my GCF. It's not going to be negative this time because my 8y is positive. If my 8y were negative, that's when I would need the negative in my GCF. I'm not going to include a variable because the 8 has a y and the 4 has an x, which are not the same. I'm going to go ahead and factor out my GCF of 4. Since it's positive, I'm going to put plus 4. Remember, whenever you factor out your GCF, go ahead and open a set of parentheses right after it. 8y divided by 4 gets us 2y, because 8 divided by 4 is 2 and the y comes down. Not changing anybody's sign, so bring down the minus. And 4x over 4 is 1. X. Okay, 4 divided by 4 is 1, and then we have our x. If you want, you can just write this as x. Either way is fine. But if you notice this time, our parentheses are not the same. And if they're not the same, we can't do the next factoring step because they're not a GCF. But we can't say that this is not factorable. Right now, all we can say is this way doesn't factor. So what we're going to do next is try a different grouping. You need to figure out which two you want to put together, and then we'll put together the other two. Okay. So the way I'm going to start by grouping in our second way, I have an XY and I have a 4X. So why not put those two together? I have XY, and then I'm going to carry my sign, my 4X. I'm going to go ahead and draw my wall in between, breaking them up. And then on the other side, I have my negative 32 plus 8y. But that's really weird. That's not in descending order. So let's go ahead and rewrite that as 8y minus 32. And just so they're on the same level, I'm going to bring my xy minus 4x down. Now I could have done my xy and positive 8y on the left and negative 4x and negative 32 on the right and seeing if that worked. But this was the way that I decided to group it this time. If we're looking at the left side, we have x, y, and 4x. Our smallest coefficient, our smallest number is 1, which means our GCF would include a 1 for its number, but luckily we got a variable here because they both have an x. So we're going to divide each term by x. And remember, you can skip that work step that I just wrote in orange if you're comfortable doing the mental math. Xy over x. X's cancel, which means we're left with y. Drag down my minus. 4x over x. The x's again cancel, which means I have y minus 4 in my parentheses. Let's try the other side. I have 8y and negative 32. This time when I'm looking at a GCF, I'm hoping there's a number because the 32 doesn't have a y, which means no y or variable in the GCF. Our smallest number is 8. 32 is divisible by 8, which means we have a GCF of positive 8. Since it's positive, I'm going to put a plus, and we're factoring out the GCF, so I'm going to open up some parentheses. 8y over 8 gets us 1y, or y. Drag down my minus. 32 divided by 8 gets me 4. Notice now that the parentheses are the same. We've got it worked out where they're the same, which means that we can factor it out. We're going to factor out the y minus 4 in parentheses. We're going to open up a second set for everything that is left. On the left-hand side, when we take in y minus 4 away, we're left with an x. And on the right-hand side of the wall, when we take the y minus 4 away, we're left with the positive 8, which is where our plus 8 comes in. And remember, you can also write this answer as x plus 8 times y minus 4. Either one of these is correct. Do not write the y minus 4 twice because we're factoring it out. We only have to write the factor once.